that can relate to you wherever you're at in the world and whatever your circumstances are. So we've got a couple of minutes before we get started. We're not recording anything yet. I see people coming in. Do me a favor and put some ones into the question box if you can see my webcam fine. I'm not going to leave that on for long, and you can see the screen and you can hear me all right. And you can use your little Q&A box for that. Put some ones in if you're all right. And then be really bold and put in kind of where you're at in the world. And Mark, I'm going to be getting rid of my box showing all the little attendees and questions and everything after we get started, just because I've got to be able to see my screen. So you're going to be, it'll be up to you to be looking for questions and things. Welcome, David. David's been with us some number of times. How is Arkansas today? All right, that's weird. Oh, hell, there we go. I recognize some of you. I don't recognize others. So please, if you don't mind, put in where you're at. Good, thank you for the one from some other people. Just that's whether you can hear us or see us fine. Mark, why don't you go ahead and say hi to everybody. We're going to start here in just a second. Mark is in Bangladesh. Anyway, why don't you start recording, Mark, and we will officially kick this thing off. All right. Hey, everybody. Wayne, sitting here in my parka in my studio. So it should look like similar surroundings. No, we don't have a power outage and it's not freezing cold, although we are having a relatively cold day. But it's me. I haven't shared this at all, but just because you guys are close and I love you, I'm going through some health challenges that we're not figured out totally yet, but one of them is that I get some pretty severe chills. I had started to have some about an hour ago. I actually got into my bed under some really heavy covers and was able to do work on the computer and get ready for this, but I came in here 15 minutes ago and tried to do this without wearing this big heavy coat, and I was sitting here, shaking because of being cold. And anyway, I'm not going to leave the webcam on for that long because we've got amazing things to be sharing on the slide. So, but that's an explanation. Anyway, love you guys. Glad you're all here. This is our 9th week. Mark's got up on the screen here. This is our webpage, eatcommunity.com/webinars, but you could just go to your website. You guys are all members of the EAT community. When you sign up to come to one of our webinars, you are members. I'm not going to name any names, but I have looked at several of you guys on our site, which we have the ability to do, and you've never been to our website. You are missing a huge amount of amazing information. Mark's got it up here, and I asked him to put it up so that he could just show you how you can get last week's webinar if you didn't see it live, because I think you're going to want to watch it if you didn't see it, because it'll be a great lead-in for today. And there may be some things that I kind of move into today, which you're going to really understand better once you get that additional information. But gosh, look at Jim and Jessica up here. Their webinar was unbelievable. Jonathan Latham, his part 2 of his COVID-19 virus origins series is unbelievable. You probably got on here, Mark, somewhere of Jake and Gianni, and you probably have Christy. Unbelievable. These were world class. Christy has a following of many, many thousands of people, as do Jake and Gianni, as do a number of these folks. So this is here for you. It's free. You have it. Look it up. Check it out. So Mark, click on mine real quick, just because I want to show you what it looks like when you do that. Mark's, so he's going to pull up the page you get when you just click on that. And there's the video, which we're not going to play right now because it'll get feedback in the audio. And then a little bit further down, a little description of what there was. And then if you want, you can just listen to the audio using SoundCloud here. And I think for you, those of you that are, now, if you're Eat Free members, which probably most of you are, you can't download the webinar. But if you're Eat Elite or Eat Pro members, you can download the webinar and then you can watch it anytime you want. Obviously, we don't leave these up here forever for our Eat Free members, but it'll be here for a little bit at least. So enough of that. Mark, why don't you hand me the screen? I'm going to take it. And we're going to go ahead and start here. All right, wow, I already am seeing it. So let's see, show my screen. Tell me when you're seeing my screen, because I'm going to switch it to view in a mode, which means it'll take up the whole screen here in just a second. Okay, so I'm going to actually get rid of my webcam. I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to move this to view in present mode. And Mark, when it gets to present mode here, tell me, make sure you can see it. All right, you should be seeing it very large. Everybody filling up your whole screen. Okay. Awesome. And interrupt me with questions, guys. As we're moving along, Mark's going to have to be looking at them. As I told you, I got to get rid of the question bar so I can just keep moving. But please interrupt me. So a little bit of review. This was about 5 or 6 slides from the end yesterday. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but I'll tell you, if you don't get anything else from this whole series of webinars, please take away these keys, which can be used for anything in your life, not just for creating an ongoing income stream from water security and so on. Anything you do, okay? So again, here goes. First is history and observation. Anything you do in your life, think about it. Observe if you're going to relate to the land. Observe your location carefully. Be as creative as you can to develop a plan. And here's the key on this one, that builds on what was historically there, what historically was, and what it could be now. Don't turn a desert into, don't try to turn a desert into a tropical forest area. Don't try to do things that the land never would have done because of its environment. Research the past if you don't know what it was. Observe now in the context of the past, not the current status. Most people observe now in the context of now. Don't do that. And then creatively vision, model, and design the future. Number 2, huge. Don't worry about failing. Construct by failing forward. Be as Thomas Edisonian as you can. Again, Thomas Edison didn't used to say ever say that he invented the light bulb. He just said, I figured out 9,999 ways not to invent the light bulb, and one time I got lucky. Think about what your outcome will be for generations in the future, that's really gives you a reason to be doing what you're doing. And then realize that whatever you do to whatever your ecological system is, you probably can't hurt it badly. Systems are way more resilient than most people believe. Number 3, manage for minimal future impact. Stealing from Mark Shepard, use stun, strikingly terrific utter neglect. I will take a farming outcome any day where I have to do little to nothing and make some kind of a profit over doing a lot and making a lesser profit, or losing money like most farmers and ranchers do. Don't, and this is a real key, manage the entire ecosystem that impacts your specific community that you're working with. Remember, an ecosystem is the whole area, the air, the water, the soil, everything surrounding what you have. We like to say everything up gradient of it, meaning that either it's usually elevation-wise, but it could be that it's not even elevation, but it's where water flows, if it's groundwater, for example. And manage that. Don't manage the pond, for example, which is what we're going to talk about here, and all the organisms that are in that. That's the community. And the populations, which is what a lot of people are prone to manage, which could be fish that you're trying to grow to sell. If you start at that fish level, you're going to fail. Lastly, don't always worry about optimizing productivity. Really optimize ecological balance. And this whole thing is circular. Everything here interacts with the other, all these bullets, and they make the whole thing work. Number 4, harvest what is available. In other words, don't always try to grow something. Instead, let the system tell you what it can have. If you look towards a diverse system, you're probably going to find something to harvest that's very different than what you really intended to harvest. Be creative and take what your system gives you. Boy, I've used this before and I didn't catch that give, which should be gives till now. And lastly, make sure you enjoy it. Have fun with it. And don't worry about just the dollars. There's so much other ways to measure productivity. And frankly, the best way you can ever measure it is by legacy, which means how do you have future generations look at what your efforts are and how are they benefited by them. So now, this is where I ended last week. We're going to break down these 5 keys and see how they can apply in your life. And we're going to use a case study that is applied to a restoration and ecological development that I have done. This isn't hypothetical. This is an example. And I could tell you 10 other stories where I have done this on other sites. But this is a system, this is a success story that I look out my window and see. And it's pretty graphic, and it will have considerable legacy. So let's start with key 1 and talk about history and observations for this case study. So you have to understand a little bit about me for 2 reasons. A lot of you probably don't know me. And if you're going to believe anything I've already said or will say, you need to understand that I do have a little bit of credibility to do it. Secondly, you can understand how your background really has already prepared you, whatever it is, whatever your background is, to do spectacular things. Don't worry about if you don't have a background that's anything like mine or anybody else's. You already have what you need to do amazing things. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but it's going to be pretty complete. So I mentioned before, I said this last weekend, this was really important, where history defines future. And that is my living in a place called the Antelope Valley when I was growing up and seeing it inappropriately, a desert, being turned into irrigated, industrially, factory farmed, over ammoniaized with fertilizer, huge amounts of pesticides and herbicides, create an industry for 10, maybe as many as 20 years. And then that entire effort completely failed. The land's resilient. It has come back to the desert that it was, but there were many years in between when it was just an arid, awful wasteland. Not only was there no good legacy, it left a horrible legacy. I was fortunate to be there and see it and learn from it and put it into play in a lot of what I've done throughout my life. When I was a junior in high school, my parents moved from that Antelope Valley location to a beach location. It's only relevant just because it was fun. I enjoyed it. I was able to surf and play tennis and other things year round. It was amazing. But I had a high school science advisor and teacher named Bob Hubbs. And I was done with all the classes that the school had. He couldn't find anything else that I could take that would give me some value. So he said, you know, my brother runs a marine lab down in San Diego, about an hour and a half away. Do you think your parents would allow you to go down there, or could take you down there, or let me take you down there and spend time with him on weekends? I may have some pictures of this a little bit later. I think I do, actually. No, I'm going to get to them, but so I'm going to move on to Steve Circling a little bit after this. But so I started going down to this marine lab, and it was very cool. We got to do all kinds of things, the people who were interns there. I was the youngest of the interns. Most of them were college students. I was a senior in high school at the time. And one of them was we got marine rescue mammals that had been somehow injured or abandoned by their moms or whatever else. And we rehabilitated them and then put them back out into the ocean. Well, one day, 3 of us were working as interns, and in the morning, Dr. Hubbs came in and he was dressed very differently than he normally was. Usually he was in a t-shirt or a tank top and flip-flops and shorts, dressed like we did. This day he was dressed with a suit and tie. I mean, it was really weird. And we said, "What's going on, Dr. Hubbs?" And he said, "None of your business, but I'm going out for lunch. And when sometime while I'm out, we were going to get a killer whale in here as a rescue. You guys help them get it put in here, but I do not want you to go into the tank with that killer whale." Well, guess what? That's like telling teenagers to get in the tank. So bottom line, he leaves. When he comes back, we're in the tank. He catches us. He comes and yells at us, tells us he's going to fire us. And then many years later, I learned the rest of the story, which I'll put you on pins and needles for a little bit and tell you a little bit later, because it's hugely significant to me and what happened with that. Dr. Hubbs was a huge factor, maybe the most important factor, for helping me get into a place called Scripps Institution of Oceanography, which is another San Diego-based school. It's actually University of California, San Diego, but everybody knows it by Scripps. It's simply its name. It is at least one of the top 3 marine labs in the world. The other 2 are both in the United States, and they're also just known by real simple names. One's called Moss Landing, which is in California. The other's called Woods. Wow, I'm forgetting the name. Woods is part of it. It's on the East Coast. It's on Martha's Vineyard. Woods Hole. I'm sorry. I've just forgotten the second name. Anyway, I was real fortunate to meet a guy who was a co-graduate student with me named Steve Surfling. Steve Surfling was years, maybe decades ahead of his time. He had an aquaculture farm off campus, not very far away, close enough that those of us that were grad students could work over there in our non-grad school required hours. And I lived really close because I was doing a lot of things right there on campus also, and got to go to Steve's place in Solana Beach. And the kinds of aquaculture technology he was working on in 1974 and 75 were, some of it was not even yet used today. It is that modernized. Steve was a genius by all accounts. And I was able to stay involved with him and get mentoring for him well after that. Unfortunately, he died way too young. He was working on his pickup truck in Florida some years later, when he was, I think, in his mid-40s. He was, by the way, only several years older than me. He was probably 24 when I was 21 or 22. And he had an explosion under the hood when he was working on his car and killed him. But it was amazing what I was able to learn from Steve Surfling. I'm doing it telling you, you think of people in your lives that have affected you. University of Idaho, which was after Scripps, was where I went to get another degree. I got a few of those, a PhD in aquatic ecology. Its impact was many different ways, but the biggest part was I was able to interact at a one-on-one level with college professors, even though I was still a grad student. A negative thing happened. Here's something to learn from. Sometimes the most negative things that happen in your life become the most positive things that ever happen in your life. That happened. My major professor, a guy named Mike Falter, Dr. Mike Falter, had promised me when I accepted the position to be a grad student of his that he would not go on leave for the 3 years that I was going to be there before I got my degree. Well, 2 years into it, one day he says, "I'm sorry, but I'm heading to Australia for a year." And I said, "What? You're leaving?" And he said, "I said, you promised me you would." "No, it's going to be a great thing for you. You're going to take over my role. You're going to be professor in my place, even though you don't have your PhD yet. You're going to teach all my classes. You're going to advise all my undergraduates. You're going to be the senior grad student, which you already are, and you're going to help everybody else with their projects. And it's going to be wonderful. So when I get back a year from now, you can just take a little longer and finish." I said, "Mike, that's great, but I won't be here when you come back because I've got a family to raise, and I'm going to finish my dissertation and everything. I'm going to mail it to you if I need to communicate with you, however I need to, and I'm going to be done." And that, both those things were true. The experience of being able to do what Dr. Falter did in his role was something I never could have gotten by a postdoc, by any other means. And it was, again, a huge negative that turned into a big positive. After leaving there, University of Idaho, I was able to get a professorship position in Sioux Falls, South Dakota at Augustana College. Unfortunately, that was 1978. I couldn't make enough money to feed a family there. So literally, I had to do other things to just feed my family. Some of you probably heard this, but what do you think I made a year, an annual salary as a tenured track, not tenured yet, assistant professor teaching a brand new curriculum at one of the highest paid colleges in the Midwest and even across the country. Put a guess in the Q&A box. And Mark, again, if people are putting questions or comments, make sure to interrupt me. But I had to do something. So I had done consulting while I was at U of I, and when Mike Falter left for that year in Australia, he had a whole bunch of consulting clients that I didn't even know about that I took over the work with. So I was able to charge them a fee and to do that. Well, when he came back, they were now loyal to me, not to Mike, Dr. Falter. Instead, they kept working with me. And so I had to do that consulting just to make enough money to feed a small family, my wife and a little baby and myself. Anyway, that allowed me to form a company called ATC, 1978. I hired a receptionist just because I needed one. Our office was in the very back of a warehouse area in what used to be a grocery store. It's a terrible location, but we got lucky. I won't go into more detail, but here's where luck comes in. And by 1984, we had 1,000 employees. We had offices all over the United States. And we took the company public, which means we raised a bunch of money. We were able to make some for ourselves from that. Plus, we funded the company very well. That company today has 10,000 employees, still there, does very well. And it's a legacy that I feel I'm very proud of. And they had their 35th anniversary last year. They did a video about it. And the guy who runs the company today is somebody who was a grad student that actually worked for me in those very early days and was a student of mine at Augustana named Don Beck. And Don basically did something I never expected, and I'm really highly humbled by it. This video that I think is still on their website, he acknowledged that I was the founder and that the influence that I had was pretty amazing in that company. So anyway, lots of things you're hearing in there. Mark, do you have something? I'm hearing your voice. I wish. Take 13,000. 13K. Yep, 30 would have been nice. That then leads to brownfields. Brownfields is a European word that we adopted here in the United States for properties that have environmental contamination that are being redeveloped. They're being cleaned up for the problems and redeveloped. Long story, but in 1994, as I was exiting another thing I had done that I was very proud of, which was the environmental insurance industry, I was able to buy a little strip mall in Boulder, Colorado that had a gas station. There was an underground storage tank that had leaked and a dry cleaning location that had had some leakage of PCE into the groundwater. They paid me to take it. I was able to clean it up, and I sold it and made a really nice profit. At the same time, a guy back on the East Coast was doing a very similar thing. We got together. Bottom line, we created a brand new industry. About 2 years into that, we were having a meeting with a bunch of other people that were beginning to play in this new industry. By the way, everybody told us we were nuts. If you're doing something that's of value and you can get some history of, realize that if people are telling you it's nuts, you probably ought to look, because it doesn't mean it's nuts. It probably means you're doing something amazing. They said, you're going to lose your shirt. You can't buy these contaminated properties. There's no way you can protect yourself. You're going to totally lose everything. Well, not only did we not lose everything, but we created a whole industry around it. Today, there are hundreds of indies, maybe thousands, that buy these kinds of sites. They don't lose their shirts for the most part. Some of them do, but most don't. And guess what? 5 years later, people were telling us we were lucky that we found something early. Well, it didn't matter. We might have been lucky. The reality is you can still do it today and make a great income from it. But bottom line is that what what we were able to do was prove them wrong, but more importantly, we were able to do something good, create a legacy. And taking properties that otherwise would just have graffiti painted on them, chain link fences around them. You've seen them. There are still a bunch of them out there. And I have worked with multiple groups through the years and done billions of dollars of acquisitions and hundreds of billions of dollars of cleanup on sites all over the world. Still do it today. I have a partnership with some guys out of Cincinnati called CERTA. We just bought a steel mill in Pennsylvania about a month ago, and we're going to be closing on a variety of other sites in the future, and we've already bought a number of others. And again, we weren't stupid. We weren't crazy. We were just using our history, all of those things that preceded it. I never would have thought of doing it if it wasn't for all the history that I had that preceded that. Lastly, bring us up to today. In 2006, I thought I was probably at the point where I could kind of retire. And I moved here to northern Colorado from the Denver area, about an hour and a half north of where I had lived. Moved to a beautiful ranch, decided to do the story you're going to hear about, which is take a piece of overgrazed cattle field and turn it into an ecologically balanced agricultural or even circular economy, sharing economy location. What we call today an ecological business park. We didn't have a name for it then. So that's just something that has come in the recent past. So, this is going to be real quick now. That's Chuck Yeager. I had the pleasure of being able to grow up down the street from him. Chuck died recently. I don't know if you saw that. He was one of my dad's best friends. He was a test pilot. My dad was a test pilot. That's the X1 that he broke the speed of sound with. No, excuse me. That's the X1 that he broke the speed of sound with. That, I think, is the X15, which he, I think, might have hit Mach 3 times the speed of sound in. That's also Chuck over there. This is an amazing place that there's been several movies made about. It's a bar out in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and only if you were a test pilot or a crew member could you go to it. My friends and I tried to sneak in a bunch of times, and literally you couldn't get within a mile of it and not get caught. At least we couldn't figure out a way to. And that's just cool because I knew a bunch of those guys, but never got to go into that place. This is where I grew up with looked like for about a week out of the year. Those are poppies. That's the Tehachapi Mountains in the background. It was a beautiful place. It was a desert. A lot of people thought deserts are horrible. How can you enjoy living there? Well, they're not horrible, and they have their own unique beauty. This is kind of a cool one. Anybody can get who this guy is. Put it into the Q&A. And let's see. I think I might click once more. No, I got to go back. Sorry, I got to go back to that one. I went too far ahead. I got to go back several here. Let's back up. Click down here. I need to back up. Does anybody put in who that might be? Anyway, right behind us, we lived in a neighborhood where all the houses had block walls around them. And it's like our parents, when they moved there, were Western frontier immigrants, and they needed to have their own little frontier. So they carved out this little place with a block wall around it. And it meant that it was really hard to make friends with people who lived a little ways away because you really weren't close to them, even though physically you were. These walls created barriers. Well, as kids, we walked all over on the walls and we would meet who was ever there. It happened that two houses backed up to ours, and on the left, there was a family that was there for a relatively short time. As it turned out, it was Neil Armstrong, the fellow who walked on the moon. He was there for what was called the same thing that Chuck Yeager was as a test pilot, and that my dad did. And they were there flying these planes at the speed of sound, and above. He eventually got involved in the Apollo project. Well, a family moved in next door to him that this guy you see his picture of lived in. And if you look on Wikipedia for either Neil Armstrong or this guy, whose name I'm going to tell you in a minute, you'll see it says they lived next door to each other. That's Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa is a rock musician, dead for a long time from drugs and bad things, who lived next door to Neil Armstrong. And he and I got into a war because he would throw dog crap into my backyard and I'd throw it back into his. I loved hearing the music that he played. He was about 10 years older than me. My parents hated it and everybody else in the neighborhood would. But Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Mark, you've probably heard of them. You know I've talked about them before, but they were way ahead of their time in what they played. And their music is still highly accepted today. So I was lucky in having this guy behind me just because it's a great story to tell. I went to high school at an amazing place. I started to play tennis because of this guy, Steve Chilcott. He was the #1 draft choice in the United States in baseball in 1965. That's our high school in the background. That Antelope Valley hat he's wearing. He was a senior when I was a freshman. He led what became about a 10-year legacy of baseball players that were amazing. On my Little League All-Star team of 12 players, 9 of them played professional baseball. 4 of them played in the major leagues. And it was just an amazing group of guys. Well, there's no way that I was going to be able to be as good as some of them, so I took up a different sport. One over here on the right, tennis. And this is a picture of our team in 1972 at the University of California, Irvine, when we were lucky enough to win the national championships. And this is us. You can kind of take a guess at which one is me. This is our coach, Myra McNamara. This is our #1 player. No, this is Scott Carnahan, our #2 player. This is our #1 player, Bob Chappell. And these guys went on, all of these except me went on and played professional tennis. Remember I mentioned Scripps before? This was my lab at Scripps. So looking out of the door of my lab onto the beach. This is about medium tide, close to low tide. High tide, the waves would break right up below our lab. We could throw our surfboards in the water and paddle out into the surf. It was out here, pretty amazing. I mentioned these places. These are places that I was lucky enough to be. University of Idaho, there's the Scripps Pier there, and again, looking at it a little different view with our lab. I didn't talk about Bethany, but that was a place that I was an amazing college I was going to be at. Here's the University of California, San Diego, University of San Diego at Scripps, and also San Diego State, where I was able to teach courses. This is the University of Idaho. This is called the Kibbie Dome. It was built right when I was there. It was the first indoor football stadium in the country for a small college. And Kibbie is the guy who they gave them a bunch of money to build it, and they named it after him. It's still called that today. The guy was a crook, and he never actually gave them the money. He pledged it, and it never got there. This is a picture of the University of Idaho. I lived up here on Moscow Mountain. That's what's in the background here. That was the first time in my life in 1975. I bought a small acreage, and ever since then, I've lived on a farm. I took this 7 acres, which is up here in the timber, and turned it into a ecological agriculture facility. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was kind of a hippie, and a lot of us were, and we learned to live off the land. We were off-grid. We did all kinds of things, and it was just the way we lived. And we felt we lived really well. I bought it for $10,000 in 1975 and sold it for $42,000 when we moved in 1978. And it sold last year for $2.2 million. It's got a lot nicer house on it now, but it's a lot of what we did on the land many years ago is still there. This is Bethany, where I taught. It was a wonderful place, Augustana, where I taught. I didn't talk a lot about that. I have my field over here. I can't see what's over in the corner. That's also Augustana over on the right. These are the businesses I talked about. ATC, Cardinal ATC is what it was named for a while. We had an amazing microscopy setup, and we were leaders in transmission electron microscopy. That's a transmission electron microscope. We had to put that in with a crane through the roof in this building where it is, because it could not be put in through the building anyway. It was too big and weighed too much. I don't remember exactly what it weighed, but we had to build up the concrete floor underneath it so that it wouldn't vibrate with an earthquake or whatever, anything. Doors closing, whatever else. Multi-million-dollar instrument. Still useful today. It was analog in a lot of ways, and so some of the digital things wouldn't be there today, but all the optics, everything else that you see here, this will be able to see things down to micron size or less than, much lower than micron size. I didn't mention this, but I was the kid that sold lemons to lemonade stands, kid. And that's what kind of turned me into an entrepreneur for the future. Again, just some future businesses. We had a pet store at one point. That's not it, but I never did take pictures of it. That is pictures from inside it. It's called Clark's Pet World. University of Idaho, again, I did all kinds of entrepreneurial things there. A little bit later, we had a sports card store, sports memorabilia. This is inside it, some of the stuff that we have. This is the insurance company that we formed. I had a very successful Amway business at one time, lots of just different things. So mention all that stuff, but I also was always a jock. I was always into doing things that required competitiveness and the willingness to never quit. 40 years ago, I started working with these dogs, and these are retrievers. That's a golden retriever. I've had labs and goldens. This picture is probably 20 years ago. For 39 years, we never got to a national championship. Last year, we went to our first. Over 10,000 dogs were in competition to get there. Only 80 of us qualified, 32 of us went, and we made it to the final 11 of that group. No, 14 of that group. Huge, amazing, lifetime achievement, probably will never happen again. I only mention it because I stuck with it. Never quit it, love it. Doesn't mean there aren't times that I hate it, but I love the endeavor long term. I've been a runner for a long time. This happens to be a profile of what's called the Leadville 100. You can see here, that's at 13,000 feet almost. It's called Hope Pass that we climb over. It's a 100-mile race where there's 33,000 feet of climbing throughout it. And I did it first time when I was 49. I've done it 4 other times. I failed at it also once. And I still do long distance running. I did a 15-mile run the day before yesterday, which is probably why I'm shivering today. I haven't recovered from that totally yet. But it's a lifetime endeavor. As long as I can be on 2 feet, I'll still do something of it. I can't do 100 miles anymore. A couple other views. This was in one of the races that we did. These are what we call 14ers in the background. Anything from this up is above, anything above this is timberline to 11,600. This is actually above timberline in a really beautiful summer meadow. This is in the Leadville 100 going up to Hope Pass and up to the summit of it. And these are people running. There's 514 entries every year. Over 10,000 people will apply typically, and they have a lottery unless you've run it before. And it's a very elite sort of thing. Tennis, I told you, I played. I also coach tennis. This is Dick Hahn, a guy that played professionally after I and a number of others have coached him. I still play today. I'm trying to play very competitive at a 65 and older level. And it's a real goal. Started playing a little bit of pickleball. I actually went back to playing tennis because people said, you can still play tennis. You can still move around. Still have good legs. I'm a farmer and a rancher. These are pictures of where we live. That's an elk that's near us. This is a river that's just down below our ranch. This is a converted mobile home into a barn. This is taken soon after we got it, so it doesn't look quite this beautiful today, but it still looks very nice. And you'd never know that it was a mobile home. We got it for free because you can't take mobile homes that were built before 1978 to landfills in the United States. because they could have asbestos or urea formaldehyde. This didn't have either of those, but we lodged many hundreds, if not thousands, of different kinds of livestock in this building since we got it 14 years ago. We grow alpacas. This happens to be a world champion named Belvedere. Not a big deal. This is my wife, Deb, by the way, the most important person in my life. And just happens we got somewhat lucky, although we bred for it, and he is now bred animals all over the world. We were able to sell him after we had done all the breeding we wanted. This is a market farm. We had 80 different varieties of vegetables in here. This is not stun farming. This was a lot of work. And we're actually looking for a market farmer again right now. If somebody would want to come to Colorado or is already in Colorado, you might put the word out. Anybody that you know for that? So back to history and observation. Specific now to this ecosystem. Northern Colorado and Mountain Sky Ranch. We are an arid Rocky Mountain region that historically, we're in a canyon. One side of our canyon was igneous, granitic rock that came out of some kind of volcanic activity. The other side is sandstone that came out of being underwater for a number of years, billions of years ago. It was real important to understand that because water comes into our ecosystem of ponds from both sides under both those histories, and we have to understand what that water does and what it would be like because of that. And it was actually what originally triggered to us that we had water. There was no water above ground. Everybody that has lived here told us there's never been water above ground. You're crazy to think that you can find water. We found this place by looking at over 100 properties in 2 years, and we wanted to do these things: dog training, aquaculture, and be near friends. And we were able to find this property and find, I believe, that it had water. That's what allowed us to found Mountain Sky Ranch, which is where we're at. We researched its past. We learned that through the years it had been a quarry. It had been the largest area to grow marijuana in the soil, not in other, not in like hydroponics or whatever. It had water rights. We used satellite imagery and saw things. You can get satellite imagery of sites. This one we were able to get it back almost 20 years. We were able to see what was there 20 years before we bought it. And before we did anything, after we got it, we just observed it. I would come out here as often as I could. I would walk around it. I would look at things. I would smell things. I'd use all of the senses. It's one of the important things you think about, and literally get to where I learned as much as I possibly could from history about it. And then I had professional knowledge. I had developed natural aquaculture systems, and not so much terrestrial ones, but I felt like I could learn. I got around really smart people. Here's something to remember. There's nothing on a slide about this, but remember this one. You will be 5 years from now the summation of the people you're spending the most time with today. You will be 5 years from now the summation of the people you're spending the most time with today. I got around guys like Mark Shepard when I first started to develop this, knowing that I could, if I spent a bunch of time with them, I could learn and know what I could do 5 years later. If you look back on your life, if you're anybody over 25 years old, look back and see who you were hanging around with 5 years ago. See whether I'm right with what I'm saying and how that influenced where you're at today. And it could be in all different kinds of areas. So today, when I'm wanting to become a better tennis player that I mentioned, all I'm doing is playing with guys that are better than me, which means I'm mainly playing with younger people, a lot younger. Or if I'm playing with guys my age, I never, at all possible, play with any of them who aren't better than I am. Because I don't want to be 5 years from now like the guys that are the same level as I am today or worse than I am today, because that's what I'll be if I keep hanging out with them. From the system perspective, I did that, and you saw the names. I did that with aquaculture previously, Dr. Hubbs, Steve Surfling, Dick Ford, a whole bunch of other names, Mike Falter, a bunch of people I didn't mention the names of. But I hadn't done it for terrestrial systems. And I was able to get around people like Mark Shepard and Dan Brown and a number of others throughout the country and throughout the world. And then finally, remember, this is all those things of history and observation. We put in plans for our dog training, fishing, beauty, eco-community. And actually, we didn't think we could do anything with aquaculture. We looked at the land and said, guess what? Even though that was our goal, we had observed it enough that said, I don't know if we can make aquaculture work. Turns out we were wrong and we were able to. So this is an image of it. It'll come clear here in a second. It takes just a second to get clearer. Maybe it won't. I can't not come clear, but you'll see it. I'm talking from right here today. And Mark, are you seeing my cursor on the screen? Okay. So my house and our studio that we live in is right here. When we bought the place, there was a road that you're seeing right here. This is a cattle ranch. It's our closest neighbor. That's about 3/4 of a mile away. Right up here is a thing called Carter Lake. It's about 2 miles away. But there was a gate right here, and beyond that gate, there was nothing other than this old quarry scar that is up here, and a little bit of a scar, which we didn't really see immediately, but then we found out eventually was a pit with 100-foot tall sides that was right here. No water, none of this water you're seeing all through here. First thing we did is we built a road so we could visualize it better. Our goals eventually were to build this house right up here and to move into it, and we were able to do that. Then we built a road up to there. But again, mostly for 6 months, we built this road and we observed. And what I observed is that there were springs underground, there was water, and all I had to do was break up the sandstone that was above them. By the way, this is the sandstone that I talked about. Above the top of this is a ridge that's 600 feet higher than this river bottom here. And right here is the ridge over on this side that is also about 600 feet higher. This is all granite over here. On this side, and literally right above this picture, is pine trees as an ecosystem. This is brush and cactus, whole different kind of area than over here, which clearly through the years, we'd seen that there were a lot more water near the surface over here. And the sandstone water stays near the surface. So I knew there had to be some here. Bottom line is we then were able to create a pond system, which is going to be constructing by failing forward. We have got about 9 minutes left. Mark, are there any other questions, comments? Because this is going to take one more week. We're going to finish this up next week. Why don't you guys, I'm going to pause for a second here, and you guys think of some questions or some comments. Call BS on me. Say, hey, this is amazing. Say what you've learned. What can you do on your property? Do something like that. Be a little interactive. Go ahead, Mark. You said somebody had said something. Actually, he died of drugs. Zappa did. But by the way, you know his kids' names? And they're pretty famous. Mark, do you know them? You know his 2 kids' names that are pretty famous that actually played a little bit themselves? Moon Unit and Dweezil. So he was Frank Zappa, so his kids were Moon Unit Zappa and Dweezil Zappa. This is Thomas Edison, again, over here. This is a great thing from Robin Sharma, Dream Big, Start Small, Act Now. I think I might get a little further into this, but please, everybody, if you've got some thoughts or comments, put them into the question box. Or if you're really bold, just raise your hand in the little box where your name, and Mark will unmute you. You can ask a question live. Yeah, really great question. Historically, the cattle ranch was me. So I'm going to back up, put that slide back on. The cattle went all the way to a fence line that you can kind of see on the map right here from downstream. So the gradient here is this way. There's actually a change in gradient. This pond is at the top of our drainage. Everything above here drains this way towards Carter Lake. And then from here down drains this way towards what's called the, if you saw, remember the picture of the river before? That's down at the bottom end of our property to the south. And the cattle were coming from a ranch that's over here up towards us and grazing all the way up to the fence line that was right here. So all of this bottom, we call it, low bottom area where there's a lot of grass, naturally, had been just massively overgrazed, all the way up to the fence that's right here. There were cattle that were managed appropriately up gradient, up here, and they still are today. And I'll talk about that. And because we actually moved them through rotational grazing over about 1,000-acre area, which is all up here. They were not there in those densities. There are only like 9 or 10 cow-calf units, as we call it at that point, that were above. And so we didn't believe that there was really any influence from up gradient onto the property. So our biggest challenge was to make sure we got rid of the cattle. And you're going to see that in that constructed, this next section. I'm going to talk about it in terms of the failing forward. One of the failures forward were the guys that owned these cattle that were allowing them to illegally come up onto our property, threatened to kill us. And we had to file police claims against them. Yeah, I mean, this is the wild, wild west out here where we're at. These are guys that ride their horses with handguns on their side and rifles on their horses. And we were threatened at one point to be killed. But I'm going to get more into what we did, but there were cattle mainly on the property and then all the way going down grade. What else? Question-wise? Why don't I do this? This is going to take just a second. I'm going to get out of this view. I think I can exit this view. I want to pull up a current Google Earth map. This might cause us to go a minute or two over, so hang with me. You know what? Why is it not online? That's weird. I should be seeing, oh, there, it just came up. I can click on this. And, by the way, if you haven't seen it, we've got an amazing series. Oh, there we go. Do you remember the name of the speaker, Mark, that used Google Earth and Google My Maps to do maps of your property? from just Google My Maps. What was that fellow's name? He lives in Colorado, actually. Great 3-week series. David was his first name. I'm just not thinking of the last. I didn't want Google Drive. I wanted Google Maps. You're seeing a little bit of my own history here now, so that's fine. What's that? Close. This takes lots of memory, so I'm going to close it. Open up another tab. I don't know why I clicked on Google Drive. That's what I commonly click on because I'm using it to open up things. Come on, it'll load. Hurry up. I have a very poor internet, and it cycles in its speed. That's why it did this. Come on, let's try again. It'll happen. Just sometimes you have to be. Here's where being patient is important. Come on, baby. There we go. Google My Maps. There we go. And then I'm going to put our location in. Actually, it's going to come right up to the location. So it's kind of cool. Yep, here we are. Remember I said we're down below Carter Lake, so it's going to come up a little bit down here in just a second. It's still just loading. Here we are. That's where we're going from. It's interesting because it usually shows that road going further. Right now, it's not. They may have finally claimed. We've been trying to get Google to end the road before it gets to our place forever, because it usually shows it going all the way through here down to, this is the Little Thompson River that I showed you that view of. Maybe they've finally done it. Anyway, I'm going to go to satellite here. This means this is a relatively new map, which will be cool because it certainly didn't show the road that way on the previous version of Google Maps that we had. So I move this over the middle, and then I'm going to blow it up. So the ridge, there's actually a road that runs almost along the ridge. This is 600 feet higher than us over here. And here's the ridge right along here, right about there. And then there are cliffs right here, see them down here. If we went further up, you'd see them. So this is 600 feet higher too. Now we're going to expand this. Okay, getting clearer. So actually, that little is not 901. That's where the quarry is. Now look at here, it continues to show the road going further, which it really doesn't. So here's the system you saw last year. More of our ponds down here, more of them down here, all the way down to here. That river is right down below here. I'm going to be able to blow this up quite a bit. And you're going to pretty clearly see 22 ponds. Well, 16 actually above here. So our newest pond is right here. It is not in the image yet. I don't believe. Well, that might be it. No, it is too. This is the first time it is. And that's it right there. That was not there before. So here's where we keep alpacas. This is where our males are. This is where our females are. This is the fence line that I said the cattle went all the way up to. Up here in this area, you're not really seeing it. I'll blow it up a little more. Is where we had 1,200 chickens for 5 years. These are shipping containers that we use for a variety of different purposes. This is that mobile barn that I showed right there. These are pallet buildings that we use for livestock enclosures, and we give away plans for them. They're amazing, inexpensive buildings. The reason the field's got all this, looks like, you know, weird cuts in it, is that's done for dog training. The greener grass is a higher cover, and at the end of the season we mow it. We're about ready to do that now, and then we feed all of this as hay to our alpaca. We built a gazebo. We have a dock down here on this pond. This is a 3-acre pond. It ends right here with an island. Excuse me, 2 acres now. We separated it from the one right above it here, which we call pond number 2. That is about 1 acre. There's a third, pond 3 right here. It's about 1/4 acre. This one's about 1/2 acre, which continues over this way. These 2 are about 1/3 of an acre. This one has actually got a U in it, and it's about 1/2 acre. This one is about 1/3 of an acre. This one is about 1/3 of an acre. This one is about 1/4 of an acre. This is where the stream goes underground. And look up here, you don't see any water. Green, though, shows you that there should be water, but this is now heavily upgraded by horses. This is a horse ranch. Not overgrade, but this water never came back up here. I developed the first spring right here, and then multiple others down this way. And then, as I mentioned, we built a new pond 2 years ago, right here. And it is fed by springs that are right here. There's a grove of trees right here. And then we have multiple other ponds down below us. There's one right here that's about 1/4 acre. This one's about 1/2 an acre. This one right here is about, less than 1/4 acre. This one's about 1/4 acre. This one's a little more than 1/4 acre. This is the house that I said that we built, that we lived in for a while. And then here's where the stream continues to flow. It didn't have water in it before, into the Little Thompson River, which is right a little further down here, right here, right, coming in right here. I'm going to move back though. So these are cliffs. And there's a house. Somebody has an artist cabin that's right down here. And I'm going to just blow it up one level bigger, and you can start to see even a little clearer what we've done. This is what we call the pit right here. Those are 100-foot walls, all kinds of storage, but also production facilities. We have a deck right here between 2 shipping containers that we use to work on of all kinds of things. This one we grow microgreens in. This one we grow cannabis clones in. There's just uses for everything all along. Oh, excuse me, this is the one that we grow cannabis clones in. I think I can blow this a couple levels higher. We do weddings, family reunions, you name it, adventures here. This is a fire pit, 15 feet wide, a whole bunch of seats around it. We can have huge bonfires. We play paintball up in the forested area up here. We have a golf course, a pasture golf course. When you see, it's hard to tell, but there are artificial grass tee boxes. There's one right here. There's also one right over here. Several others up a little higher. And once we get to the highest zoom here. This pond is 18 feet deep right here, and throughout the rest of it, it's like a bathtub, goes down to 7 feet deep. And I'm going to talk about the fish. Remember I said we didn't think we'd get aquaculture. This is the one that we do the harvesting in with electroshocking and so on that I talked a little bit about before. And wow, we can really blow this up. This is where one of the things we had to accept. These are Russian olives. They are not native. They're horrible invasives. Every year we have to cut a bunch of them out. We have to manage the ecosystem down to the pond. This picture is probably in the spring, I'm guessing, of maybe last year. Not positive when. Gosh, we can blow it up one more or less. That's the closest we can get. This is the gazebo I talked about. The fire pit, picnic table there. There's the gazebo, a dock, fishing boat, and hangout boat on the pond. So we're a little bit over. I'm going to stop here. Any other questions from anybody, Mark? Comment? Well, great question. We'll answer that next week. Diversity. Let's just start with that. Let's just say you increase your diversity, which is, remember, I said that's one of the things you want to do. Secondly, because of our hopeful use, it's actually more advantageous to have more smaller ponds if you get die-offs, because then some disease hits, something goes wrong, and you don't end up having them all be affected. Thirdly, we started a number of different kinds of fish in different ones of these ponds, and then we manage the area around them for that specific kind of fish. Fourth, and you probably know why, I'm not going to care about dog training. Well, it happens to be my hobby, something that I love, but I've got hundreds of other people that love it in the area too, and we make income from it, quite honestly, great income from it. So the ponds were created so there are great sight lines, view lines to do retrieves across these ponds. If you had one big pond, you wouldn't be able to do that. Whole bunch of reasons. I'll give a lot more next week. Anything else, Mark? Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks for hanging with. You guys have been awesome. Appreciate you. Great webinars we have tomorrow and Friday. Monique tomorrow with Compost LA. She's an amazing speaker. And then Jonathan Latham on Friday doing part 3 of the origins of the COVID virus. So come to those. I think you'll enjoy them. Why don't you take us out, Mark?